Good evening and welcome to number 7 of our study concerning the last day events. The title of our subject today is The Judgment of the Living. Two important prophecies that are the pillars of our faith are the 1260 years of persecution, which started in 530 AD and went right up to 1798. We studied this in our previous presentation. 46 years later, the second prophecy, the 2300 years, was the beginning of Adventism and the investigative judgment, which is the focus of our study today. The judgment of the living. In the investigative judgment, men's lives will be tested by God's law. Great Controversy, page 482. It is the standard of the judgment. Through the enabling grace of Christ, every man can obey the law of God and is required to do so. The only question asked in the investigative judgment is, have they been obedient to my commandments? Found in Gospel Workers, page 315, and Desire of Ages, page 637. The first angel's message announced the beginning of the judgment. Great Controversy, page 352 and 355 to 356.
And I saw another angel fly in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach unto them that dwell on the earth, and to every nation, and kindred, and tongue, and people, saying with a loud voice, Fear God, and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment is come, and worship him that made heaven and earth, and the sea, and the fountains of water.
The investigative judgment began in 1844 with the cases of the dead. When does it pass to the cases of the living? We know that it will pass to the living before the plagues begin. Testimonies to Ministers, page 446, and the second advent occurs. Great Controversy, page 352 and 485. You can also read about this in Christ Object Lessons, page 310. The following statements indicate that the investigative judgment will pass to the cases of the living when men begin making their decisions in regard to the already enacted National Sunday Law. So in summary, this is the sequence. First, by his ongoing decisions whether or not to accept Christ and, in his strength, obey his word, each soul is now deciding his character and ultimate destiny. 2. The National Sunday Law is enacted. 3. The person learns and understands the basic issues or already knows them. 4. He makes his decision whether to honor his Creator and keep the Sabbath holy in spite of threatened imprisonment and death, or go along with the majority and the law of the land and honor the papal Sabbath. 5. The investigative judgment in heaven immediately passes to his name. 6. He receives the seal or the mark. The blotting out of sin is one of the cluster of events which begins just after the enactment of the National Sunday Law and concludes at the general close of probation. First, the work of the investigative judgment is carefully explained in chapter 28 of the Great Controversy, page 479 to 491. As part of the procedure, the sins of the righteous will be blotted out of the book of sin. Also Great Controversy, page 481, paragraph 2, 483, paragraph 12, 485, paragraph 12. This removal is called the blotting out of sin. There are actually two blotting out experiences. The wicked have their names blotted out of the book of life, and the righteous have their sins blotted out of the book of sin. Our concern is specifically that the blotting out of the sins of the righteous. That is the blotting out event we are discussing in this present study. Both the blotting out experiences occur in the investigative judgment, which began in 1844. The great majority of God's faithful ones receive their blotting out experience after they are deceased. Our special attention is directed to the blotting out experience of the living righteous in the final crisis of the Sunday law. 3. The sins of the righteous are blotted out of the record book in heaven. They are also blotted out of the Creator's memory. 4. The blotting out experience dovetails with several other events which are clustered together. These events are closely related and occur near simultaneously in the life of each person who receives them. Sunday law decree brings judgment to the living. The judgment passes to the living at the time when the mark and the seal is given. In every case, the great decision is to be made whether we shall receive the mark of the beast or his image, or receive the seal of the living God. And now, when we are on the borders of the eternal world, what can be of so much value to us as to be found loyal and true to God, the God of heaven? Testimonies, volume 6, page 130, paragraph 1 to 2. In the judgment, one person is retained in the book of life, while another receives the mark of separation. The time of the judgment is a most solemn period when the Lord gathers his own from among the tares. Those who have been members of the same family are separated. A mark is placed upon the righteous. They shall be mine, said the Lord of hosts. In that day when I make up my jewels, I will spare them as a man spareth his own son that serveth him. Those who have been obedient to God's commandments will unite with the company of the saints in the light. They shall enter in through the gates into the city, and have right to the tree of life. The one shall be taken, his name shall stand in the book of life, while those with whom he is associated shall have the mark of the eternal separation from God. Testimonies to Ministers, page 234, paragraph 2 up to page 235. When does the investigative judgment occur in relation to the sealing? This is a sequential relationship between the judgment, the Sunday law, and the sealing, as shown in Testimonies, volume 5, page 472 to 475. So in summary, this is the sequence. 1. By his ongoing decision whether or not to accept Christ, and in his strength to obey his word, each soul is now deciding his character and ultimate destiny. 2. The national Sunday law is enacted. 3. The person learns and understands the basic issues or already knows them. 4. He makes his decision whether to honor his Creator and keep his Sabbath holy in spite of threatened imprisonment and death, or go along with the majority and the law of the land and honor the papal Sabbath. 5. The investigative judgment in heaven immediately passes to his name. 6. He received the seal or the mark. Several important points should be noted here. The time of the judgment is a most solemn period. When the Lord gathers his own from among the tares, those who have been members of the same family are separated. A mark is placed upon the righteous. They shall be mine, saith the Lord of hosts, in that day when I make up my jewels. And I will spare them as a man spareth his own son that serveth him. Those who have been obedient to God's commandments will unite with the company of the saints in light. They shall enter in through the gates into the city, and have right to the tree of life. The one shall be taken, his name shall stand in the book of life, while those who will be associated with shall have the mark of eternal separation from God. Testimonies to Ministers, page 234, paragraph 2 up to page 235. The investigative judgment began in 1844 with the cases of the dead. When does it pass to the cases of the living? We know that it will pass to the living before the plagues begin. Testimonies to Ministers, page 446, and the second advent occurs. Great Controversy, 352, 485. Christ Object Lessons, page 310. The following statements indicate that the investigative judgment will pass to the cases of the living when men begin making their decisions in regard to the already enacted National Sunday Law. These are the sequence of events: the sealing first, second, the judgment to the living, third, the blotting out of sins, 4, the marriage to the most holy place, 5, the latter rain, 6, the loud cry. When it is all over and Christ has returned for his own, they will live forever with him. Oh, my friend, we must be there. Obedience to God, obedience to his inspired word, is better than anything else that anyone could offer, even now and here. But life with Christ in the eternity beyond makes it even more crucial. May our kind Father in heaven guide and care for you in the days ahead. We are so rapidly nearing that crisis, we dare not forsake God and his word now. The cleansing of the sanctuary. The 2,300 days prophecy and the investigative judgment. Daniel chapter 8 verse 14.
And he said unto me, Unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed.
The beginning of the 2,300 days or years, as in prophetic time. What is the 2,300 day prophecy all about? Very important to us as Adventists, because it was the beginning of Adventism when the 2,300 day prophecy was understood. When did the 2,300 years begin? Well, in the book of Daniel, chapter 9, verse 5 says, Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem unto the Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. The street shall be built again, and the wall even in troublous time. So the 2,300 day prophecy actually began when this order was given to rebuild Jerusalem, and this was in 457 BC. We read this in Ezra chapter 1, verses 1 to 27. So starting from 457, the 2300-day prophecy takes us right up to the year 1844, 2300 years. Now the first part of this prophecy, as we just read, would take us to the Messiah. Okay. Now the first part of the prophecy is the 69 weeks, and then we come to the 70th week. Something interesting happened during this time. So the 69 weeks is actually 483 years, and then he takes us up to the time of the Messiah. When did Jesus begin his ministry? He began to preach at the time of his baptism, and that was in AD 27. That was the baptism of Jesus, found in Daniel 9 verse 25. And it says, in the midst of the week. Now a week in Bible prophecy is 7 years. Half a week, or the midst of the week, will be 3.5 years. What happened 3.5 years later? Jesus was crucified. And then another 3.5 years later, to complete the 7 years, took us to AD 34. What happened in AD 34? Stephen was stoned. Acts 7 verse 69. So the gospel was preached to the Jews up until the time that Stephen was stoned, and that put an end to the preaching of the gospel to the Jews. The gospel was then preached to the Gentiles. You remember the time Paul was converted? He took the gospel to the Gentiles. And then we have the 1,260 years that fell into this period. That was our study, the last presentation, when Emperor Justinian's decree in 538 was given, and the Pope was given the authority, and he ruled but persecuted the Protestants for 1,260 years, and that ended in 1798 when he was wounded by Napoleon's General Berthier. And then that ended the persecution, but something also happened. You remember the Bible speaks about the little horn that would be wounded, but that wound will later grow. And we know when papacy ended, according to Bible prophecy, it will grow again. And now we see in our time how this wound is being healed. Now in 1844 was when the 2,300-day prophecy ended, and that was the beginning of judgment and the cleansing of the sanctuary. There are the prophecies, the 1,290 days, Daniel 12 verse 11, the 1,335 days of Daniel 12, okay, and this took us to the Millerite movement and the beginning of the Adventist Church. Daniel chapter 8 verses 2 to 7 was a vision given to Daniel in which he saw the ram and the he-goat. What did this mean, and what was this prophecy all about? We shall explain in the next slide.
And I saw in a vision, and it came to pass when I saw, that I was at Shushan in the palace which is in the province of Elam. And I saw in a vision, and I was by the river of Ulai. Then I lifted up mine eyes, and saw, and behold, there stood before the river a ram which had 2 horns. And the 2 horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher came up last. I saw the ram pushing westward and northward and southward, so that no beasts might stand before him, neither was there any that could deliver out of his hand. But he did according to his will, and became great. And as I was considering, behold, an he-goat came from the west of the face of the whole earth, and touched not the ground. And the goat had a notable horn between his eyes. And he came to the ram that had 2 horns, which I had seen standing before the river, and ran unto him in the fury of his power. And I saw him come close unto the ram, and he was moved with choler against him, and smote the ram, and brake his 2 horns. And there was no power in the ram to stand before him, but he cast him to the ground, and stamped upon him. And there was none that could deliver the ram out of his hand.
The vision that we just read about in Daniel chapter 8, we shall now see how this applied to the sanctuary and 1844, the 2300 days prophecy. Gabriel was sent to make Daniel understand the vision, as we read in Daniel 8 verse 16. And I heard a man's voice between the banks of Ulai, which called and said, Gabriel, make this man to understand the vision. Where did this vision start? The vision starts with the ram, and the 2 horns of the ram are the kings of Medo-Persia. Now you remember the dream that Daniel interpreted for King Nebuchadnezzar? The world empires that started with Babylon, the head of gold, and then went over to the breast and arms of silver, which was Medo-Persian, followed by the Greek kingdom, which was the belly and thighs of bronze, and then followed by the legs of iron, and finally the feet of iron and of clay. So Medo-Persia featured in this part of the vision where Daniel chapter 8 begins. That is the kingdom of Medo-Persia. The 2 horns of the ram are the kings of Media and Persia, which ruled from 539 to 331 BC. Second part of the explanation was the Greek kingdom, the kingdom of bronze, the belly and thighs, and the ruffed goat is the king of Grecia, and the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king, Daniel 8 verse 21. The third part of the explanation found in Daniel chapter 8 verse 8. Therefore the he-goat waxed very great, and when he was strong, the great horn was broken, for it came up 4 notable ones toward the 4 winds of heaven. And this was the Roman power represented by this particular horn. From the vision of Daniel chapter 8, we see the 2300 day prophecy, starting with the ram and ending with a little horn, but not really ending it because it was wounded. And this little horn will start growing toward the end of time, which was the prophecy that was understood by Seventh-day Adventists. Unto 2300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed, and the beginning of the investigative judgment. This is the meaning of the vision that the angel Gabriel gave to Daniel, found in Daniel chapter 8 verse 19 to 24.
And he said, Behold, I will make thee know what shall be in the last end of the indignation. For at the time appointed the end shall be. The ram which thou sawest having 2 horns are the kings of Media and Persia. And the rough goat is the king of Grecia. And the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king. Now that being broken, whereas 4 stood up for it, 4 kingdoms shall stand up out of the nation, but not in his power. And in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors are come to the full, a king of fierce countenance and understanding dark sentences shall stand up. And his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. And he shall destroy wonderfully, and shall prosper and practice, and shall destroy the mighty and the holy people.
In Daniel chapter 2, King Nebuchadnezzar's dream took us from Babylon, the head of gold, right up to the feet mixed with iron and clay. That is the end of time, when God will set up his kingdom. The vision of Daniel chapter 8, the 2,300 years commenced during the Medo-Persian Empire, and that took us to 1844 and then to the end of time. I read this explanation of Daniel chapter 8 in Daniel chapter 8 verses 20 and 21. The ram which thou sawest having 2 horns are the kings of Media and Persia, and the rough goat is the king of Grecia, and the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king, and that's the kingdom of Rome.
And whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided. But there shall be in it of the strength of the iron, for as much as thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay. And as the toes of the feet were part of iron and part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. And whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. And in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom, which shall never be destroyed. And the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever.
What we understand from Daniel's longest and most amazing prophecy is the 2,300-year prophecy, which led us from 457 BC up to 1844. The first 70 weeks were determined upon the Jews. The gospel was preached to them, and after they stoned Stephen, the gospel was then preached to the Gentiles, and it was during the 70 weeks that Jesus was, or the Messiah was cut off. Jesus was crucified. The 2,300-year prophecy started in Daniel 8:20, and it took us to the end of time. The he-goat continuing to the end. This is found in Daniel chapter 8 from verses 8 to 12.
Therefore the he-goat waxed very great, and when he was strong, the great horn was broken. And for it came up 4 notable ones toward the 4 winds of heaven. And out of one of them came forth a little horn which waxed exceeding great, toward the south, and toward the east, and toward the pleasant land. And it waxed great, even to the host of heaven, and it cast down some of the host and of the stars to the ground, and stamped upon them. Yea, he magnified himself even to the prince of the host, and by him the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. And an host was given him, against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression, and it cast down the truth to the ground, and it practiced and prospered.
Daniel chapter 8 verse 15 and Daniel chapter 8 verse 23 to 25.
And it came to pass, when I, even I, Daniel, had seen the vision, and sought for the meaning, then behold, there stood before me as the appearance of a man. And in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors are come to the full, a king of fierce countenance and understanding dark sentences shall stand up. And his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. And he shall destroy wonderfully, and shall prosper and practice, and shall destroy the mighty and the holy people. And through his policy also he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand. And he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace shall destroy many. He shall also stand up against the prince of princes, but he shall be broken without hand.
This prophecy pertains to the papacy during the 1260 years that we studied last week, when the Christians were persecuted and many of them killed. In the book of Zechariah chapter 3 is an account of Joshua the high priest, and this account is actually an explanation of what the Day of Atonement is all about.
Chapter 3. And he showed me Joshua the high priest standing before the angel of the Lord, and Satan standing at his right hand to resist him. And the Lord said unto Satan, The Lord rebuke thee, O Satan. Even the Lord that hath chosen Jerusalem rebuke thee. Is not this a brand plucked out of the fire? Now Joshua was clothed with filthy garments, and stood before the angel. And he answered and spake unto those that stood before him, saying, Take away the filthy garments from him. And unto him he said, Behold, I have caused thine iniquity to pass from thee, and I will clothe thee with change of raiment. And I said, Let them set a fair mitre upon his head. So they set a fair mitre upon his head, and clothed him with garments. And the angel of the Lord stood by. And the angel of the Lord protested unto Joshua, saying, Thus saith the Lord of hosts, If thou wilt walk in my ways, and if thou wilt keep my charge, then thou shalt also judge my house, and shalt also keep my courts, and I will give thee places to walk among these that stand by. Hear now, O Joshua the high priest, thou and thy fellows that sit before thee, for they are men wondered at. For behold, I will bring forth my servant the branch. For behold the stone that I have laid before Jerusalem. Upon one stone shall be 7 eyes. Behold, I will engrave the graving thereof, saith the Lord of hosts, and I will remove the iniquity of that land in one day. In that day, saith the Lord of hosts, shall ye call every man his neighbor under the vine and under the fig tree.
We are told that this vision of Zechariah especially applies to the closing up of the Great Day of Atonement, found in Testimonies, Volume 5, page 472, paragraph 2. During that time, the Sunday laws are enacted. All will be required to render obedience to human edicts in violation of the divine law. Those who will be true to God and duty will be menaced, denounced, and proscribed. Testimonies, Volume 5, page 472, paragraph 2 up to 473, first paragraph. At that time the righteous shall stand before the judgment of the living. Jesus is their only advocate, and Satan is their adversary. Their only hope is in the mercy of God. Their only defense will be prayer. Testimonies, Volume 5, page 473, paragraph 1 and 475, paragraph 1. It is then that the sealing occurs, and with it the blotting out of sin. Note these points in the chapter. Command is given, names retained in the book of life, cleansing occurs, iniquity gone, sins remembered no more, never more to be defiled, eternally secure, sealed. All who remain in Zion are holy, written among living in Israel. Testimony 5, Volume 5, page 475, paragraph 2. Those are all the descriptions of the sealing event. The nature and timing of the blotting out of sin. First, the work of the investigative judgment is carefully explained in chapter 28 of Great Controversy, page 479 to 491. As part of the procedure, the sins of the righteous will be blotted out of the book of sin, page 481, paragraph 2, page 483, paragraph 1 to 2, page 485, paragraph 1 to 2. This removal is called the blotting out of sin. Thank you for listening. God bless you. I hope you understood. If there's any questions, please let me know. Thank you very much, and God bless.